So to make a start, pause the video, have a go at these 10 questions just to review your learning, and the answers will come up in 5 seconds. How did you get on? If you're struggling with any of these sections, go on to Brainscape, have a look, and do some studying of the basics. So this video is going to have a look at the structure and the function of the heart and cardiac outputs as well. So we're near the end of Unit 2. We're getting there. So we looked previously at the structure of blood vessels and their function, but now we're going to start looking at the heart structure and its function. So pause the video, have a look at the key learning points. Just we can use these to check that you've got the main points. So the circulatory system is made up of the heart and the blood vessels. We've discussed the blood vessels. So the heart is made up of cardiac muscle, and it has 4 main chambers. The top 2 chambers are the right atrium and the left atrium. And when you look at a diagram of the heart, the right atrium is always on the left, and the left atrium is always on the right. The bottom 2 chambers are called the ventricles. And again, the right ventricle is on the left, and the left ventricle is on the right, as if the subject isn't confusing enough. So the right ventricle pumps blood up and away from the heart to the lungs, and the left ventricle pumps blood up and away from the heart to the rest of the body. So that's why the left ventricle has a much thicker muscular wall than the right ventricle, because the right ventricle is only pumping from the heart to the lungs, so it doesn't have as far to travel as the left ventricle, which is pumping to all other parts of the body. So there are 4 main valves that you need to know about, and we've identified them here. So if you look at the heart structure, there's an atria. That's the right atria and the right ventricle, the left atria and the left ventricle. And then we've got 2 valves here, and then 2 valves at the top. So there are 2 valves here between the atria and the ventricles, and they are called atrioventricular valves. On the right hand side is the tricuspid, and on the left hand side is the bicuspid. Up at the top, between the ventricles and the arteries that carry the blood up and away from the heart, there are also valves here called the semilunar valves. And the valves in the heart do the same job as valves in the veins. They keep the blood flowing in one direction, and they stop the blood from flowing backwards. So you need to learn the order in which the blood flows through the circulatory system. So it'd be worth pausing the video and just going over this again and again and again and again. So blood comes back from the body in the vena cava into the right atrium, from the right atrium down to the right ventricle, up and away from the heart, through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. Up at the lungs, gas exchange takes place. The blood picks up oxygen, it drops off carbon dioxide, and it comes back to the heart through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. Now it's full of oxygen. It travels down to the left ventricle, up and away from the heart through the largest artery in the body, the aorta, and that delivers the oxygenated blood to the cells in the rest of the body. The blood picks up carbon dioxide and then comes back to the heart through the vena cava and into the right atrium, down to the right ventricle, up. You've got the idea. Keep going over it and over it and over it until it just comes to you naturally. The heart is very hard working. It works all day, every day of your life. And it's a muscle. So it requires a lot of energy. So it needs a good supply of glucose and oxygen. So it has an artery that supplies the heart muscle with what it needs, called the coronary artery. And that branches off the main aorta. So learn the basics from a simple diagram of the heart, but make sure you can transfer that to different diagrams of the heart. It might be worth doing a Google search on images of different hearts diagrams and have a look at them and see what you can identify, and see if there's things on there that you don't recognize, but don't panic. We need you to get used to different diagrams because we don't know what diagram they're going to show you in the exam, if there was an exam. So have a look at the next few slides, and we're just going to show you a few different diagrams. So feel free to go back and pause the video and look at some of those diagrams, and just check that you understand what the different parts of the heart are showing. Pause the video now, have a look at the key learning points, and if you've got any questions, use these key points to help you think what your questions are. So we're going to keep going. We're going to have a look now at how we can calculate the cardiac output and what a cardiac output is. So again, pause and let's have a look at our key learning points. So we know that the right ventricle doesn't pump the blood as far, it only pumps the blood to the lungs, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood a lot further. But both ventricles pump the same volume of blood. Okay, the left ventricle does not pump out more blood than the right ventricle. They both pump out the same volume. Now, to understand what cardiac output is and be able to calculate cardiac output, we need to understand what two other things are first. So the first thing you need to understand is heart rate. So your heart rate's simple. How many times your heart beats in 1 minute? Then you need to understand what stroke volume is. So stroke volume is how much blood, or the volume of blood, that is pumped out of each ventricle in one contraction. So one contraction of the left ventricle, the amount of blood, or the volume of blood, I shouldn't say the A word, should I? The volume of blood that's pumped out by that one contraction is described as the stroke volume. So if you know your heart rate and you know your stroke volume, you can calculate something called your cardiac output. So the cardiac output is the volume of blood that's pumped out by one ventricle in a minute. So if you know your heart rate and you know your stroke volume, if you multiply the two together, that will give you your cardiac output. There's an example here. So at rest, the heart rate of this individual is 60 and the stroke volume is 60 milliliters. So if you take those two, put it into the equation, cardiac output equals heart rate multiplied by stroke volume, 60 beats per minute times by 60 milliliters, you end up with 3,600 milliliters per minute. But be careful. They will try to trick you and trip you up. Look at the units. What units do they want the cardiac output in? They may want it in milliliters per minute. They may want it in liters per minute. If it said milliliters per minute here, we're fine with 3,600. But if they want it in liters per minute, you need to divide by 1,000 and you'll get 3.6 liters per minute. Be careful. It might be worth learning the triangle. So cover whatever it is that you're looking for. So if we cover up cardiac output, cardiac output equals stroke volume multiplied by heart rate. If we're looking for heart rate, cover up heart rate. Heart rate equals cardiac output divided by stroke volume. Or if you're looking for stroke volume equals cardiac output divided by heart rate. So pause the video, have a look at the key learning points, and think if you have any questions. Get in touch with your teacher.